So in terms of habitat, these hydro corridors are basically biological deserts. But this corridor here is about 16 kilometers, and it's going right through the city of Toronto. And so you're taking a barren habitat that has very little biological diversity and increasing the biological diversity and the number of species that are using it. And it's also a corridor because it's going from the east to west. The animals can move across the city, having this really wide corridor of natural habitat. So deer and foxes and coyotes are moving from one corridor. There's a lot of river corridors that are north and south in the city, and those are fairly natural, and they're using this to move between those types of corridors. And this type of a right-of-way and roadways and around bridges and different things like that can all be naturalized so that wildlife can move through these areas much more easily. So some of the challenges that we faced in doing this project is working with the neighbors, working with all these different groups together, getting everybody buying in and everybody on the same page so that we can do the project. There's all sorts of legal things that needed to be going through, different councils and different organizations needed to approve the different processes. Preparing the site, so the different processes, there was an education process for the community so that they would understand how we were preparing the site, so that they would understand, okay, this is what's happening. It's bare soil for a period of time. We're putting in this cover crop, and why is it there? All these sort of things that you need to explain to the public so that they're not completely in the dark and that they understand, okay, this is a process that's happening, and eventually we're going to get a beautiful meadow out here, but there is going to be different stages to the process. So there's a lot of education and a lot of community outreach is involved in doing such a large project like this. Some of the other challenges are things like, once you've prepared the area, what is the seed source that we're using? Because these species are not actually in this particular location anymore. They've been wiped out. And so you have to use a reference ecosystem, and okay, there's a patch over here that we can imitate, and another patch over there we can imitate. And then how do you get that much seed? We've got 16 kilometers, it's hundreds of kilos of seed. How do we get all that seed? Make sure that it's local source seed, not some seed from some of the seed growers are actually buying seed from the US for a lot further away, 1,000 kilometers away, and that seed is being sold because it has, the same species name. And so you figure, okay, I can sell the same species over here, and it's okay, even though it's got completely different genetics. It's grown in a completely different conditions than what you've got up here. Here, it's much colder, it's moister, different things like that. We also found that there's a couple different native plant nurseries in Ontario within this area, and one of them was growing all these species but on clay, and another one was growing them on sand. And this site is a little more sandy, and we found that the species that were grown on clay didn't adapt as well to this site, and so they didn't grow as well. So even small considerations like that, you think it's within your region, but then also the different types of soil and the management practices that they've been using influences the seed and the plants that you get that are going into your project. And also working with the native growers. If you don't have a seed source in the area, then you have to be the one out collecting the seed, gathering the seed, growing it out, propagating it all out, and then increasing that volume, taking the seed and then seeding another area, increasing the amount of seed again until you get the right amount of seed for your project. So there's some long-term planning involved if you're doing a large project like this, just to get the volume of seed needed, and that's extremely important. Some of the other considerations are things like garbage. People think this is a bit of a waste area, and so they just come and they dump their garbage all over. So every spring we go through his place and we clean up all the garbage that people have dumped in here, and we do things like community outreach. Okay, let's have a garbage cleanup day and have people bring out garbage bags full of garbage out of this place. So there's a level of respect that needs to be instilled within the public, so that they feel like this is a valuable place rather than a place that you can just dump into. And then just making people aware, bringing that passion for the diversity that's occurring here, making people aware of, okay, it's at this stage and this is happening. Okay, go out and see this beautiful flower that's blooming right now, and just telling people what's blooming in different times of the year, so that it attracts people out here. And there's a trail system that goes through the project as well, and you have to take some of the things you have to consider is like, well, are we doing this for the people to have a nice trail, or are we doing this for habitat? And so instead of putting the trail right down the middle of the habitat, you try to create a larger block of habitat and put the trail off to the side, so that you're having a larger block of habitat with less disturbance and allowing the wildlife to have a little bit calmer space. Things like there's multiple roads going through this project, and so you have different segments. It's not continuous the whole 16 kilometers. You've got roadways going all the way through it, and so how do you deal with wildlife when they move across that road? How do you facilitate their movement? How do you facilitate the movement of people across the road using those trails? So there's all these different considerations when you're doing a huge project like this. So, but it is worthwhile. I mean, look around. Look at how beautiful this is and how much wildlife is going to be using this area. And it's an area that didn't have this before. And now we're recreating it. We're naturalizing this urban area and allowing species to move across the area. So what are what we call key performance indicators? So they're kind of the targets or the measures that we're going to choose when we're doing our monitoring. Things like increases in biodiversity. What is our biodiversity target? Which species do we want to target, like the monarch butterfly, because it's rare? We can say to our funders, we're creating habitat for this rare species. And that's what different funders like. They go like, okay, this is the list of species that we found in here. Here's the list of species. How have we improved this habitat? We've increase the amount of infiltration into the soil, into the groundwater system, by having these prairie species, these meadow species with a deep root system versus a turf grass which has just a very shallow root system. So we're allowing more infiltration into the soil. We're pulling more carbon out of the atmosphere. A tiny little grass that you're mowing all the time is not pulling a lot of carbon out of the atmosphere. So we're increasing the heterogeneity of the habitat. We're putting more carbon into the soil. We're having more groundwater infiltration, more biodiversity. So all these different things are what your key performance indicators, and you need to keep track of that, because your funders and the citizens around you want to know, okay, what's the effect? How have we reduced the amount of heat island effect versus the road beside us? How hot is that? How hot is the structures over there? And how much cooler is it here because we're shading the soil, we're increasing the amount of moisture in the soil, so it's cooling, it's helping with the heat island effect that is within cities. So all these things are different indicators that you need to consider. What's happening beforehand, so you can measure it and you can monitor it. And that's what all your monitoring is about, all the abiotic factors in the soil and in the area. You monitor all those, and then you come back after and you go, well, how did that change? Obviously, we want all those indicators to increase, more nutrients, more carbon, more water, all this type of stuff, so that we can say, yes, we've done this great thing. We've naturalized this this corridor, and you can go to another area and say, well, here's another big highway corridor. This is the effect that we've had, and we can go out and repeat it, and we can show you tangible results, because we need those tangible results to go to a funder. And projects like this are multi-million-dollar projects. You need to be able to say, yes, I've done something. I haven't just created a whole area of invasive species and weeds by letting it grow up. You've added biodiversity to the area. So you've met your targets, and your funders are happy, and your neighbors are happy. So that's the kind of project we want. So when you're designing this project, you can sit down with things like Google Map and iNaturalist, find out what species are in the area, and then go on the ground and figure out, okay, what species are actually here, which species do I need to bring in, all these type of things. And then you can design your planting plan. Okay, this area is going to be wildflower, this area is going to be grasses, this area I need a more aggressive seed mix because there's a lot of invasive species. So different things like that. Where's the water moving within this corridor? And then once you've designed it, you need to work with the people who are going to do the restoration, because obviously you can't do everything by yourself. And being the one that you're doing this training, you know all the things that need to be involved. You need to pass that knowledge on to the people who are going to be doing the work in the field. Because with this, we had multiple crews working on this on different sites, managing invasive species, tilling the project, seeding the project, taking care of it. So there's multiple people involved in it, and if they're not trained to a high standard, then you're not going to get a quality meadow and a quality restoration project. So it's extremely important to educate the people that you're working with on all the different levels that are important. So you remember how the meadow looked when it was fully mature? Well, this is what it originally looked like. It was all this turf grass, cut low, very low biodiversity. You have a whole bunch of different weed species in there, but none of them are native. And then to convert it from this turf grass over into a meadow, it has to go through a process of depleting the soil and removing the weed seed. A lot of the invasive species are early successional species, so what happens is they germinate quickly and then they die, but we don't allow them to produce seed again. So what we're trying to do is germinate the seed but not allow it to produce seed. So we grow it up and we wait usually until it's about yay tall, and then we till the soil, and this is undergoing that process right now. And you can see these little tufts of green are oats. So we rototilled the site and brought it down to soil, removing the sod, and then we seed it with the oats, and then it's compacted. So you're rolling a roller on top of that. So we use a broadcast spreader to spread the oats, and then a roller to compact it down and to allow for more seed to soil contact. And you can see that you get better germination in the tractor tires because it's compacted more, and that is allowing more moisture and better seed to soil contact. In between the tires, you're finding that the germination isn't quite as much, but it's still enough to hold the soil. Right now it's very young, and you wait till it gets up a little bit more. So it's holding the soil down, and it's also a half rate of the agricultural rate, so there's enough space in between the individual stems that the weedy species can germinate and start growing. And then once they start growing to a certain height, then you till it again. So it's a way of depleting the seed bank and reducing the amount of invasive species on the site. And then afterwards, we're going to come in here after that process has been done 3 times. So once in the spring and once in the summer, and then later on in the fall, just before we start seeding. And then we'll come in here with a seed drill a specialized seed drill. It's usually a Truax drill, and especially designed to handle the many different sizes and the fluffiness of the wildflower seed. And so then that'll be no-till drilled into the site, and then that'll stay over the winter. They'll put a cover crop, what's called a nurse crop, over top of that, and that'll hold the soil so that in the springtime you won't have the erosion problems that you usually do. And usually we put what's called a nurse crop over top of that. We've been using millet, but we have used oats in the past. And the millet, basically it's holding the soil, because the prairie species and the meadow species spend most of their energy in the first year putting down deep root systems, and they only grow maybe 10-15 centimeters above ground, so they're not holding the soil as well as the nurse crop species will. So the nurse crop's holding the moisture in the soil, it's holding the soil down so it doesn't blow away, doesn't erode, and then the native species can come up. And the nurse crop is designed to die over winter, so the first winter it dies, and then the native species can just take off. Understanding where the water is going to go is also really important, so that you know what sort of drainage patterns are needed, and if there's a heavy rain, what sort of erosion control measures are needed to manage the site, so that you're not losing your topsoil and you're creating a good habitat while keeping your soil. So some of the other things you need to consider is the flow of people throughout the site. And originally when the architects designed this, they designed it so they wanted to put a bunch of shrubs, because there's a cross, there's two trails coming together at this point, and they thought, oh, well, we'll put shrubs along the edge there, and that'll force people to slow down because they can't see. And I told them that's a completely silly idea, because people are just going to barrel through there anyway. And I told them what they needed to do was create a roundabout. So this is the area that they've created, and eventually that's going to turn into a roundabout, and in the center there's going to be a nice wildflower planting, so that the bikers can't just zoom straight through there. They have to slow down and go around the ring, and it's a much safer option. And here you can see a couple different types of rototiller that are being used to prepare the meadow. So this is the initial removing of the sod, which is what you see in front of me, and then tilling it all up, breaking up the soil, and then once the soil is broken up, you put your seed down, and then we run what's called a packer. So you're basically pressing the seed back down into the soil, making good seed to soil contact. And the area that was going to the east, they had already been talking and negotiating about extending that even further, and there's other hydro corridors within Toronto that they're talking about restoring as well, because we had so much success. So that's why it's really important to document everything and get that community and buy-in, because once you start getting the win-win-win, then people want to do more. So I hope that gives you a good understanding of one project, and I've tried to go really deep into it to give you an understanding of like a large project and how all the different aspects that you need to be working together and to consider. And obviously this is not the type of project where just one person is doing it. You need a whole team of people, and you need a whole effort to engage the community with it. So thank you.